A horrific car crash connects three stories about love, struggle, and sacrifice. First story is about Octavio, a young man who cares very deeply about his sister-in-law. Fortunately, she is married to his brother, who is a criminal and a terrible husband who is abusive and cruel. But one day, Octavio discovers that his dog is very good at fighting. And so, in order to support his sister-in-law and win her affection, he decides to put his dog into organized fights. The main thing about this story that impressed me was that they sell you on the idea of love as a motivator. Of course, there are tons of movies out there where you go, oh, why did he do that? Oh, because love. And you just kind of accept it in that way. But this movie makes you really buy it. And Gael Garcia Bernal does such a beautiful job of selling you the angst and the torture that this character feels because he can't be with the person he loves. The story also has some really interesting things to say about culture and tradition and a sort of rejection of those. Octavio's mom the whole time is saying, hey, you better stay away from her. That's not yours, that's your brother's. Octavio's friend talks about, like, the rules of love, like, hey man, he got her first, that's just the way it is. And the thing that we as an audience keep coming back to is the fact that the guy treats her like shit. And that key point for the audience is what draws us to Octavio. As the story goes on, we come to understand that Octavio is doing some pretty horrible and perverse things. Actions make us realize that this is a flawed and selfish type of character. Like, his motivations are the woman, not doing the good deed. And so, by the end of this story, we're not really sure how to feel about Octavio. The movie is going to let us decide for ourselves what we think of the character. The second story is about Daniel and Valeria. Daniel is a married man who is planning on leaving his wife for his new model girlfriend. And Valeria is, of course, that model girlfriend. Daniel and Valeria end up moving in together. Things are going pretty well. And then one day, Valeria ends up having to drive somewhere, and she gets into that car accident that I mentioned earlier. Leg gets horribly injured in this accident, and she has to get all these different kinds of surgeries, and she goes through all these different kinds of struggles. It's horrible. And all of this puts a strain on the relationship between her and Danielle. And keep in mind that we as an audience at this point do not really like these characters. I especially should not be able to relate to a middle-aged man who leaves his wife and a model. This relationship at this point comes off as shallow to the audience. So now we get to really see if they care about each other through this test. And in this story, we are treated to two fantastic performances. Moments that are very genuine and very sweet that make us feel like, yes, these people really do care about each other. There are also a lot of subtle bits when these characters are alone that make us feel like frustration and rage is building. We're able to understand that this is a story about flawed people trying to find ways to love each other. But at the same time, maybe they're just selfish. Maybe they're just trying to make the best of the situation they've gotten themselves into. And then maybe that's all relationships are. And the way this story ends is both very tragic and very sweet. And we're not sure how life is going to continue for these people. The relationship seems good now, but we don't know. We can't know. The final story is about an old man named El Chivo. Due to certain crimes he committed when he was younger, he is now estranged from his family. He now lives in a very rundown home and is working as a hitman. The interesting thing about El Chivo is that he has lost all of the loves in his life. He will never get the feeling of mutual love ever again. He is a sad and lonely man in a hopeless situation. However, his interactions with the world and with his dogs make him feel human. He's also the most charismatic character in the movie, and that makes him a lot easier to follow. And this story had a lot of great twists and turns that I definitely wasn't expecting, and that always affected me emotionally. And Emilio Echevarria does a fantastic job of portraying all the different layers to El Chivo. This movie's structure with the 3 different stories works beautifully because we get 3 different perspectives on love. We get a young man dealing with pure passion, we get an adult couple dealing with the idea of living together, and we get an old man who's lost everything. And Alejandro Gonzalez Inarritu, who you guys would know from Birdman and The Revenant, does a fantastic job directing this movie. He gives us a real feel for the city that this movie takes place in. Everything feels real and raw and gritty. There are also some beautiful shots in this movie, and the editing is intelligent and on point. I'm gonna give Amores Perros an A+.